Welcome to Educate Us, a podcast and learning collective that explores the questions shaping education. Through conversations with educators, researchers, scholars, students, and community members, we examine the relationship between learning and lived experience. Together, we explore new possibilities for education and its role in the world around us. I am Dr. Tiffany Smith, educator, curriculum designer, researcher, founder, and host of Educate Us. Thank you for joining. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Educate Us podcast. In our previous episode, we explore what happens when learning extends beyond the walls of the traditional classroom and into the communities where we live, communities where we work, and engage with each other. We considered how organizations, public spaces, community partnerships can become meaningful sites of inquiry, observation, and authentic learning. That conversation naturally leads us to today's discussion. If communities become classrooms, what role does English language arts play in helping students make meaning of those experiences? How do students learn to observe intentionally? How do they figure out how to ask meaningful questions or interpret what they encounter or communicate those ideas in ways that extend beyond completing an assignment? Today's conversation explores English language arts, not simply as a subject centered on reading and writing, but a discipline that helps students develop literacy practices that get them engaging thoughtfully with the world around them. Along the way, we examine student agency. We focus on intentional communication, multimodal literacy, and the role of authentic experiences in meaningful learning. In this conversation, Tamara Rodney and I move beyond theory to explore what these ideas can look like in practice. In our previous Educate Us episode, we introduced the Damn Good People Community Center as an example of community-based learning. Today, we build on that foundation by examining the multimodal curriculum I'm developing. Tamara also shares practical insights for bringing that vision to life. What I'm recognizing is the gap that we already know exists, but I'm calling out the gap between high school and college. Now, I'm not talking about high school and community college because community college is still very writing centered, meaning, can you do what the act of writing requires you to do? Can you use words to communicate? That's where they're at, because a lot of them are using words in a very basic way, filling out applications, things that don't require a tremendous amount of intellect, but they still need sending an email, potentially creating a presentation. But now you're leaning into digital stuff that may or may not be happening at the community college level, but at the university level, multimodal composition is the last recognized pedagogical approach of the entire field. And so to some degree, multimodal composition is the focus for first year composition. The writing modality is still a primary source. And in my class, it is the blueprint for the multimodal piece. It helps them to clarify what their intention is for their work and to begin clearly, without a doubt, identifying where the intention is showing up in their writing. What writing technique am I using to help you understand the impact of this literacy experience on my life. So am I using emotion to persuade, pathos? Am I appealing to your ethics, morals, and values? Because I think that will persuade you to see my perspective and possibly even agree with my perspective. Am I depending on other people's ethics, morals, and values? So am I saying that this work should be championed because President Obama has a foundation that focuses on literacy for Black and brown people? And so now I'm building more ethos and more ethics associated with my intention. And then how do I take that intention and begin using it to justify other modes of communication? So if I use this ball as an image, how is this ball in my hand in this way next to my head helping you to get that same intention? And how does a video do that? So they capitalize on the intention across mode, but then if they're ready, which some of them are, I'll take them a step further and say, now you decide where it makes sense that we hear your abuela speaking Spanish to you as a child, that we hear the raspy voice of your grandmother that's still alive, who read Amelia Bedelia to you when you were a little girl. And how does that further enhance the intention? So that's the work that we're doing in English composition and in higher education institutions. How does the work that you do begin to connect with the work that they're about to experience? And so that is really what this conversation is about, with the additional caveat of what if we take learning into real world spaces? So we capitalize on the academic experience to place them in a real world setting where they have to use that which we just taught them. So it's direct transfer of skill. So that's where the spatial analysis microethnography unit comes in, because now I want to take you to a real space and I want you to identify that same intention in that space. How does your love of reading with your grandma and Amelia Bedelia on the bus in that moment, how does that show up here? And so what happens when you're trying to answer that question is it's no longer external, it's internal. Because you're going inside yourself to say, how did I feel? And what in this space is connecting with how I feel? And that's just one aspect of it. There's also the aspect of criticizing the physical space to really begin asking, why is this room situated this way? Why did they choose to put the tables and chairs over here, but not over here, or the station over here, but not over here? How is the space dictating the use and the movement, in an attempt to further begin disconnecting them from the physical and helping them to engage the inner? Now, I'm not having that conversation with them. That's a conversation I would have with a graduate level course in Rec Comp, right? But I'm taking them through that inner outer experience. The literacy narrative is the actual unit that I do before the spatial analysis. And then when they do the literacy narrative, they literally have to recreate these literacy experiences in their head. And so when they do that, they have to use their mind's eye to see those visions and then recreate those visions using whatever modality, of course, starting with the writing modality. And that was a famous activity that I did with them in the fall of 2025, where I asked them, I said, everybody close your eyes. I said, everybody woke up this morning, right? Like we all woke up this morning. Yep, we're here. We raise our hand. We're here. We woke up. Now I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to take yourself to the moment when you woke up. Go there. Are you in your bed? Are you on a couch? Are you on the floor? Are you hanging off the bed, kind of? Do you have a bonnet on? Is the room dark? Is there a candle lit? What do you smell? What do you hear? Because the real world is multimodal, right? That's literally what we're capturing when we use a camera or a photo. And when they open their eyes and they have to take me to that moment, now we're getting into the real nitty gritty of the inner outer, right? So that's what this work is meant to do. These conversations, and now I'm going to shut up because I'm going to introduce you and, we're going to get it going. But these conversations are meant to kind of explore a little bit of this with you, but within the context of the work that you do.
Got it.
All right, so welcome back to the Educate Us podcast. Today's episode focuses on English Language Arts, ELA. So if you hear us say ELA, we're referring to English Language Arts and Real World Learning and the role English Language Arts classrooms can play in helping students connect literacy to the world around them. Thank you to our guest, Tamara Rodney, for joining us today. To begin, Tamara, can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about your experience? I typically do a bio intro in the beginning, so this is a chance for you to really help us to understand who you are and, what your experience has been teaching language arts. Like, authentic bio here.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate you. I think what you're doing is dope. So I am Tamara Rodney. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. I migrated to the United States when I was 8 years old. I turned 50 a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
So that means I've lived 42 years of my life in the United States. That journey began in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, wow.
Where I was educated myself through early elementary ed, middle school, and high school. I did a year at the SUNY in the SUNY system, the State University of New York system, and New York folks know SUNY CUNY dynamic.
I know SUNY.
And then I moved to Florida, where I continued my education. So I started college at like 17. That's important to note. I finished high school in 3 years. And then it took me a lot longer to finish college, which I have my own reasons why I think that was so. But I graduated from the Florida State University system, particularly from FAU, Florida Atlantic. That's where I met my husband. That's where I got married. That's where I had my first child. And then in about 2007, life brought my family here. So my husband got a job at Webster University. He brought us here to St. Louis. And we've been here ever since, with the exception of 24, 25, when we went back to Florida because I had to be in service to my parents. They're in their 70s, approaching 80. My stepmom has dementia, so my dad needed some help. My mom passed away when I was 8 years old, so I've only known my stepmom since then. So I went to be in service to them for that year. Quickly realized that Florida has changed radically, and my family liked our life here in the Midwest. So moved my parents out of Florida. They're now in Georgia with my brother, and we're here. So that's personally me. I started my teaching career ELA in South Florida in the school district, Broward County Public Schools, very diverse school district. I started off teaching high school, ninth grade. And then I continued my profession here in St. Louis after transitioning to the Midwest and returning to get my master's degree. And I taught at the community college for a little while, St. Louis Community College to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
I taught a lot of the developmental writing courses there, and
Mm-hmm.
then returned to the K-12 space in 2016
Mm-hmm.
and taught at a local district here, predominantly white district, for 7 years before heading back to Florida, where I taught at Broward County Public Schools
Mm-hmm.
for that within that year, and then came back to the Midwest, ended up at another predominantly white institution neighboring the one where I previously taught, and have decided not to return there this
Mm-hmm.
coming school year, and
Mm-hmm.
instead am scheduled to teach. This is the Midwest, especially St. Louis. Fragmentation
Mm-hmm.
is what we do best.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what would be one district in South Florida is five here in St. Louis. So the beauty of that
Mm.
dynamic, though, is that you have choice. So when you find yourself in a situation that doesn't quite fit, as I've learned here to say here in the Midwest, not a good fit, you can
Mm-hmm.
make a different decision. So I've pivoted and I'll be starting at another local district, not predominantly white. Um, I feel like it's pretty diverse, but predominantly Black.
Mm-hmm.
I think is urban, is how I would
Mm-hmm.
describe it. So
Mm-hmm.
kind of excited about that, um, because it's
Let
been
me
a
ask you
time.
you said Broward,
Broward,
B-R-O-W,
Broward. Yeah,
Broward,
Broward,
A-R-D.
Broward, Broward
And
County
what
Public
type
Schools.
of, what was the student
Oh
population at
gosh.
Broward?
So Broward, I think, is the seventh largest district in the United States,
Oh,
if I
wow.
could express the population that way. When I started teaching there in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they told us there were 150 countries represented in the district
Oh, wow.
alone. Like my
Geez.
first teaching assignment was an ESL, several ESL classes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back, I think that number could easily be 200 now, having
Oh, wow.
taught there. The school where I was in Broward last, well, 24, 25,
Mm-hmm.
largely Hispanic now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't, so Broward is just north of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when I lived there in the early 2000s, Miami is where the majority of the Latin population lived in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
since then, that they have migrated north in the state. So that means there's a large Hispanic population, to the point that Trump's election for his current presidency happened while I was in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And I vividly remember ICE activity happening at the start that January, right?
Mm.
And I remember, so
Oh, wow. I remember that.
I left mid-semester because we had decided we were coming back to Missouri, and
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be available to make some decisions and moves. But I'm telling you the story because ICE happened. So I reached out to my former department chair and I was like, yo, what's going on? And she said there was a scare. Someone put on Twitter that ICE was coming to the school and kids started jumping the fence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So like that's how I was like, oh snap, because there
Oh,
was a
my
large
God.
Hispanic population there. But interestingly though,
Mm.
with that, so at my predominantly white institution, I often speak of the white boys in those spaces
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it is through them that I've learned distrust, because it's
Mm.
often them that don't believe me capable of, them and their parents that don't believe
Mm-hmm.
me capable of teaching them anything. But in
Mm-hmm.
South Florida, it was the Hispanic boys, particularly the
Mm.
Hispanic boys that identified as white Hispanic or
Mm-hmm.
white. So similar feeling from that population was interesting
Mm.
to note.
That's
So
very interesting.
I think in total I have 20 plus years of education. So again, I've being in St. Louis, I've been able to teach at the community college level. I also adjunct at Webster University. This is like my 15th year doing
Mm-hmm.
this. And most recently, I'd say since the 2000s, 220s, 220, 221, thereabout, I've started teaching the entry graduate course to
Mm.
students in Uzbekistan in the master's in education and Edin, uh, education and I'm losing it right now, but it's their master's in I want to say education and innovation, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm losing it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the first course in the program, and
Mm-hmm.
I've taught that course to graduate students in Uzbekistan. So they're typically English is their second language.
Mm-hmm.
They're seeking an American degree because this is an
Mm-hmm.
American institution with a physical space there in Uzbekistan. So
Mm-hmm.
I've done that too in terms of teaching writing at the graduate level, grown from that experience. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, this is my 20. I was dated by my oldest daughter. She was born in 2002. I started
Mm-hmm.
teaching K-12 in 2003, thereabout.
Mm-hmm.
So I date my time in education since about 2003. So that would be
Mm-hmm.
23 years,
Yeah, it
roughly.
is. Because that's when I started too. That's not when I started in education, but that's when I started in higher ed. And
Mm,
so I always go back to 2003. That was my first year teaching at St. Louis Community College, and it was 2003.
yeah.
That's very
So,
interesting that there's so many different questions I mean, we really could get into the student audience and modification of the curriculum for
mm,
these different groups. And, I could really go there with you because I would love to know how you do it. I will say that, the information I shared with you about my curriculum and how it takes people inside their self
yes.
eliminates a lot of the external boundaries that people create for themselves when they call themselves Black or white or Hispanic or whatever it is that they, whatever label they've been conditioned to call themselves or feel
Mm-hmm,
convicted to call themselves. But their self is at the
mm-hmm.
base of all of that. And this work actually takes them inside. But thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know that about your background. So that's very
Yeah,
interesting that you've had that
yeah,
movement, and we definitely need to talk about SUNY and CUNY
yeah.
another time as well. I want to get into the connection between English language arts and this work that I have planned for the curriculum. So I want to ask them some little bit of some focus questions in that
Mm,
way. So when many people think about English language arts, they think about essays, grammar, literature, literature discussions, right?
mm-hmm.
From your perspective, what should ELA instruction help students learn about the real world?
It's so funny you asked that because this year I uh, identified Dr. Radine Sims Bishop Sims, mirrors,
Mm-hmm.
windows, and sliding glass doors work. So I've always known mirrors and windows, didn't know the sliding glass door part. I don't know. I guess
Mm-hmm.
that's people always drop off a third thing,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the thing they drop off. But to answer your question, I think one of the things I've always felt that English language arts should do
Mm-hmm.
is of what it did for me. I think it should allow you the opportunity to step into a world that might not be your own.
Ooh, I love
Um,
that.
and and I mean that because maybe your world is perfect. You have no
Mm-hmm.
difficulty in life,
Mm-hmm. Or the
but
complete opposite.
or the complete opposite. I purposely didn't do the complete opposite because sometimes we begin there, right? But
Mm-hmm.
let's say your world is perfect. No difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
You've always had ease. But then you step into the world of someone else, like a Malcolm X,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
often taught curriculum around his autobiography, but you step into his world and you're like, oh, snap, right? This is a
Mm-hmm.
completely different world from
Mm-hmm.
him losing his dad, from his parents being Garveyites, his dad being
Mm-hmm.
murdered, his mother, purposely being steered toward a mental health institution instead of being helped, to cope with what grief
Mm-hmm.
must have looked like for her at that time, to
Mm-hmm.
his transformations. Maybe you're a ninth grader and in your perfect world, you've never seen humans
Mm-hmm.
transform. But the idea of ELA in my mind is that it allows you to,
Mm-hmm.
again,
Embody.
mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors, though, this ability to
Mm-hmm.
step into the experience of other people and to see
Mm-hmm.
their experience. I vividly remember reading Kaffir Boy on the train in Brooklyn as an
Mm-hmm.
adolescent. Like that's when I
Mm-hmm.
used to read a lot, was on the train. And I vividly remember stepping into Kaffir Boy in South Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
I love
apartheid
that.
South Africa and what that means, and what it means to grow up in a township, a Bantu township, and
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that came with that text. And I vividly remember being on the train and stepping into that world. Here
Mm-hmm.
I was in Brooklyn, right? This wasn't South
Mm-hmm.
Africa, but then stepping into that world and being able to draw commonalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Commonalities that can then help me as I navigate my own life. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that is the purpose of ELA. I often tell people, when I introduce people, I tell them I'm an English teacher, there's always this, please don't check my grammar. I'm like, that's not why I came to this work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't come to it for a prescriptive approach to correcting students' writing. Like, I am not your editor. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to
Mm-hmm.
red paper your stuff. Don't worry. You're not going to get that from me.
I love that so much. And I'll tell you, it's so funny that you're making the differentiation between who they are and what they do. And
Yes.
that's exactly the dual pedagogy that I present in my dissertation. It's the difference between having agency. I would even use the word embodying the work, because based on what you shared, it's embodiment,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to use whatever tool that is to express. So I might look at your grammar. I might look at your paragraph development, your structure. I also taught developmental writing at St. Louis Community College. That's actually what I taught when I started, but I might look at those things. I might ask you to produce an essay. I might teach you genre.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I will teach you genre. I'll
Mm-hmm.
teach you letter writing genre. I'll teach you email writing genre. I'll teach you text messaging genre, because ultimately what I'm teaching you to do is to communicate across sources, right? And situations. I will do all of those things, but if you don't have anything to say, then you won't be able to use them anyway.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. It's so funny you say that, because the other day and I'm trying to remember, I came across it, but this idea of assigning writing versus
Mm-hmm.
teaching writing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Hmm.
because I feel like in my this most recent educational experience that I had, it was a lot of assignments. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of
Mm-hmm.
assigning writing. But the
Mm-hmm.
ELA part, so I was talking about the literature part, and now you have me thinking about the writing part.
Mm-hmm.
The writing part goes hand in hand, but I often want to teach students how to write, right? So, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I would often do a 3-paragraph essay, because I felt
Mm-hmm.
like the 5-paragraph essay, very developmental, very helpful in terms of getting students to understand structurally
Mm-hmm.
how to write.
Mm-hmm.
But there were
Mm-hmm.
times that I was like, well, what if you just want to write a 3-paragraph essay? What if your thesis
Mm-hmm.
statement had one strong argument instead of 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember
Mm-hmm.
having conversations with colleagues and administrators about it. Like, why does it have to be 5 paragraphs? Why can't it
Mm-hmm.
be 3 strong paragraphs? But that idea of the structure of writing, that I think is really
Mm-hmm.
important. I even think of the graduate level, like on my board in front of me, I have the 5 chapters of the dissertation, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is
Mm-hmm.
structure to everything, and you should understand that structure,
Mm-hmm.
because once you understand that structure, then you might be able to bend the structure. You might be able
Mm-hmm.
to alter the structure. And to me,
Mm-hmm.
when you start doing that, then you have real power. Then you are
Mm-hmm.
wielding your pen as a sword and
Mm-hmm.
not just as a pen, for the Islamic representation of the pen as a sword, right? So, this
Mm-hmm.
idea of
Mm-hmm.
understanding structure
Mm-hmm.
is important for me when I teach it to my students, because my thing is, now when you understand the structure, you can change that,
Mm-hmm.
but you will make that change based on something. Somebody won't
Mm-hmm.
ask you a question and you'll be like, oh, snap. Why is my thesis statement in the 3rd paragraph of my essay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or, well,
Mm-hmm.
or my writing? You can answer instead of it haphazardly being there. And then with the
Mm-hmm.
infusion of AI, you talked
Mm-hmm.
about different genres, but my thing is, there's an AI genre now too,
Mm-hmm.
right? With
Mm-hmm.
the infusion of artificial intelligence and this
Mm-hmm.
idea of prompt engineering. it goes back again to what is important to me in my ELA profession and practice is that students become, like you said, agents. They're empowered to become agents of their writing and their destiny, right? So that's ultimately what comes to mind, even as I think about that structural piece. Like I remember for years, my teachers correcting my writing as an undergraduate and talking about my comma splices. I remember that vividly. There was this one teacher who's like, you got a comma splice, comma splice, comma splice. And I think I had to be in my early 40s when the light bulb went off. And I was like, well, dang, I could potentially add a semicolon here to fix my comma splice error. Or I could put a period here, right, to end the sentence. But those are structural choices that I get to make based on how I want my writing to flow. And I was like, had this lady just taught me that instead of telling me all the time that I had a comma splice, run on sentence, like teach young people the power of their choice when they understand a stylistic misstep. You see what I'm saying?
And I wouldn't even say it's a misstep. It's a choice. So I always tell my students, what do you want to do? What do you want your readers to do here? If you want me to pause, put a comma. If you want me to stop and potentially process what it is that you just shared without so quickly moving on to your next idea, then put a period. Because now the choice that I'm making is based on how I want you to experience what I'm sharing, and how I want you to experience what I'm sharing is based on whatever intention I have in persuading you of whatever this is.
But to go back to that inside-outside dynamic, thinking about what you just said, to me, the power is in teaching students to step outside to be the reader, right, of their work, and step back inside to be the writer.
Absolutely.
I'm saying? That inside-outside dynamic, just like you said, what do you want me as your reader to do? And a lot of times in the teaching of writing, that's often what I communicate to students is you are the writer, but you must write with your reader in mind. And don't think that your reader is just Ms. Rodney, your English teacher. Because 100%. Going back to that real world dynamic, your reader could be somebody completely different.
Now, let me tell you how that shows up in terms of the reader, who the reader is in my classroom. So in my classroom, they are each other's readers.
Absolutely.
And why do I choose for them to be each other's readers? Because what do we depend on in our academic journals? What's the best source?
Peer review.
100%. The peer has to scrutinize it, question it, rule it out. A peer determined whether I even got the title of doctor. A peer. And I won't even go so far as to say they're my peers. They had to become my peers. I had to position myself within their space in a way. You talk about boundaries. So I position myself in the classroom as the evaluator, not the reader, not your audience, not, I love that. I love that.
Listen, it's so funny. That's what came to mind when you said what you said, though, because if you have to stop in your writing to ask questions of yourself as it pertains to that reader. Have I satisfied my reader here? Do I want to move on? And I think so often we assign writing and don't teach it to the extent that students approach writing as a completion task. Not this metacognitive experience of stepping inside and outside. It is, let me just turn this in to this lady so she can give me my grade. When really, again, as I think about some of the things that I've taught over the years as an ELA teacher over and over again, the ones that touch students are the ones, meaning the text, the literature that moves students is often the literature that speaks to them, right? For whatever reason. I think, I finished with the Odyssey with my freshmen this year. And I'm like, nothing else. If nothing else, come July 16th, y'all better be in the theaters watching the newest version of the Odyssey. Like I tell them, like my greatest joy as a teacher would be for one of you all to recreate these books, these texts as modern day films that we can go and watch and feel, you know,
100%.
much the same way that we felt the text when we read it. And oftentimes, like I think of the story of Odysseus, Telemachus, and Penelope is a single mama. Like, say what you want to say. Telemachus is a young boy coming to terms with his manhood without a daddy in the picture. You know, so it's crazy. You know, so
that sounds a little too modern day.
Well, we're gonna see what Christopher Nolan has done come July with his new take on the Odyssey, because I'm intrigued because they're already mad because in Lupita Nyong'o's role, she can't be Helen, God forbid. You know, so let's see how he does with this new retelling.
Now, we have a podcast episode coming up later that'll focus on multimodal composition. But when you said, wouldn't it be awesome if they took the experience and recreated it? Right?
Remixed it.
Or remixed it so that it was a modern day experience, but that modern day experience could be a video in a video format, in an imaging, in a sound, in music put together. So now we're getting them into GarageBand, where they're putting sounds together, or you know, they could create I don't want to say fake, but you know, a class Instagram site or something, and you know, like that's real world. That's real world. So let me ask you this. So in exploring ways to connect the classroom, so we've been talking a lot about the individual experience of the student. So we talk about this inner outer, them, you know, focusing on visions in their head, recreating them using modalities, and you know, understanding all these things. What about the connection between the classroom and community spaces?
Easy.
Organizations.
It's so funny you say that. As we're talking, I was thinking, once I had an idea with the Odyssey to have my students make children's books. And I did it. Like, take this story and make it applicable to a second grade class. The next iteration of the thing was to have them read the book to a second grade class in the district. So now you and your group have created this book, the story, the second grade story. Now you're going to take your second grade text, the cover that you made in the makerspace on wood, right? And, you know, these pages that you and your group illustrated, and now take it and go read it to a second grade class in district. That's community, right? So that's
also reinvesting in the very learning that they're receiving. So now learning is not this separate thing, this task, like you said, they have associated it with, but it's a part of their life. It's a part of their existence to be able to take in and give out. And I love that.
And they had to name their
I didn't even think about the academic community within the, you know, of course, like, I'm thinking about out in the,
out in the community, your grandparents, your neighborhood.
But that is a community.
Yeah, that school community is your community. You know, a big part of what I see here in St. Louis is high school students going back to their elementary schools in their cap and gowns when it's graduation season, you know, and parading in front of the younger grades as, you know, routes of aspiration and hope. But now you go back to those grades and you read to them, right? And then there comes, you know, some groups had some janky books that you couldn't open, you know, and you couldn't turn the pages, like basic things like that. Like, if I were to do this again, like, you know, there's something to be said about revision. I often, as an ELA teacher, wonder what writing would be like if we allowed our students the power of revision. Because sometimes you've completed an assignment or a task, and you may have given it your all, you may not have, whatever the reality is, but you've executed it, you've gone through the full cycle of the thing, the curriculum. Now go back with that new knowledge and improve. What would you do differently? Try it again. Like, I often tell people, again, assignments. In my classroom practice, sometimes students will do the same assignment multiple times with a different book. I remember years ago going to a PD. I think this is where it started. And there was something in the PD about what happens when a student reads a book multiple times. And they had the researcher had students complete a task each time they read the book. And what the research came to show was by the third iteration of the task, that's when we got to the place as English teachers where we were like, that's what we want our students to get to. That's the place that we want them.
There was a breakthrough.
Criticality, right? Like, but that was after reading the same thing for 3 times. And it wasn't 3 consecutive sittings, right? So sometimes I'd be like, what are we doing? Especially, you know, in some of these spaces where whiteness is so prevalent and the belief is that we are more excellent than those other people. That feigned sense of excellence sometimes just equates to what the kids say today. You just do too much. Because sometimes it is in intentional simplicity or intentional, because simplicity sometimes is not the right word. It might, you know, it might diminish, but this idea of intentional selectivity, that you arrive at true critical understanding with your students. So I'm not trying to do 50 million things. I'm just trying to do this one thing, but we're going to do it again and again until you get to a place where you're like, wow, I get it now. Right? Because again, we're dealing with young people. Like I said, I was in my 40s when I figured out comma splice. And that was a feedback I was receiving in my 20s as an undergrad. And I was like, sometimes developmentally, kids just need some space and some time to grow and develop.
What does it mean to get it for you? Like when you say get it, because, you know, I have an idea of what I mean when I know that my student has got it. What does it mean when they got it?
For me, they get it when they can transfer. You said that word early on, and I was like, yep, we on the same wavelength. When my students can transfer a skill from one context to the next and be able to demonstrate mastery of that skill, they have got it. And notice I didn't say completion, I said mastery, and I said transfer. So for example, I am learning about this grammar construct of sentence structure, sentence length, compound complex sentences, you know, simple sentences. And in that construct, I'm learning about the comma, the period, and the semicolon. For me, they get it when they can transfer that from their writing to understanding a writer's choice in a passage with those same skill sets and articulate the power of what they've read based on the writer's choice. And then they can transfer that to something that is not writing. Maybe, like you said, it is like, I'm amazed at stories. These kids pump out Instagram and TikTok stories like nobody's business. And I'm like, but that's a storytelling medium. So you can, again, punctuate your Instagram story or your TikTok story or whatever other story it is. You can punctuate what is the visual. You can punctuate something. You can use written punctuation in a visual and artistic way. Like, to me, again, that transfer across genres, across mediums, across experiences, you know, like I grew up around hip hop because hip hop turned 50 a couple years ago. So I'm like, okay, we're kind of in the same age cohort. And I'm often reminded of how intelligent rappers are, the ones that I like to listen to anyway, because they will often bring those experiences in their other spaces of life to their music for impact and power for their audience, the listener, and do it in a way that is insightful, but then applies to written and lyric, you know, the written form and the lyrical form. And you're like, and then the delivery, because everybody can rap, right?
Let me ask you this. So, and this is great because we're moving along a continuum from who am I? So that's the first thing. Who is myself? How does myself show up? What is my intention in my work? Why am I doing this? What's motivating me? Like, what am I trying to express? Right? That's the base, right? And then we move to the mode. So what mode am I using to express? Am I using words? If I'm T.I., I'm using words. If I'm Killer Mike, I'm using words, right? Am I using words? Okay. Am I using imaging? Am I using a camera? Am I using drawing? Am I using imaging?
Am I using fashion, fabric, cloth?
Exactly. So now we're getting into the modality, and that is literally the duality of my work. This concept of self, this agency that they develop, and then the mode or the modality that they use to express. So let's take it up one notch. They got it, right? They're in your class. When you read their work, you feel their soul. You're on the bus with grandma as she's reading Amelia Bedelia and driving down King's Highway and going over the bumps together, but you don't take your eyes off the page, or nor do you focus on anything except the sound of her voice as she, you're there, right? I've graduated. I've graduated from high school. Okay. All right. And although I was already in the real world, now I'm in the real world. What is that transfer? How does the work show up now?
So the work, to answer that question, the work shows up in an adult who is fully aware of themselves. They know who they are. Like, nobody got to tell me. Nobody convince me. Nobody got to, I
love that,
articulate. Like,
that's number one.
I know who I am, right? I know what I like. I know what drives me. I know what conversations cause me to want to get closer to the physical space where it's happening. I know the conversations that repel me. I know when I choose to put on whatever I put on, I know who I am. So there is no attempt to convince me or to educate me about myself. I'm a fully actualized human being, right?
I love that.
In this moment, because we know that, using the language of Michelle Obama, we are becoming. We're humans who are becoming. But in this moment, I know who I am. And then I know, or I can make choices in my daily life based on audience, based on modality. So if I work for a nonprofit and I have been asked to put together this community gathering, the execution of that thing, I'm making some intentional choices. And if I am put in the room with whomever the leader in my company, corporation, organization is, and I am challenged about my decision-making, I can respond to that decision-making in a way that reflects thoughtfulness and careful selection. That for me is the execution of who you are in the adult world, right? I know if I have a baby, I become a mom early in life. I know what got me here. None of this stuff, it's not happenstance, circumstance. It's not a whoops. These are choices that I made intentionally. I knew exactly what was going to come. I could imagine, I don't know exactly, but I could conclude what outcomes would result in my decision making. That's to me the next level of a student.
That is the next level. That is the next level. And that is so good. So when we think about the plans for this curriculum that I've developed, and the fact that they could potentially, for this pilot, now it doesn't always have to be this particular location, but just, could be any real world location, right? But for this particular pilot, we're now embodying everything that you just described in the Grove, in a community building called Damn Good People, with a Black-owned coffee shop inside. And let me just, now for Tamara, I will share my screen with you. So, but all our podcast listeners, go ahead and go to, I believe it's coffeeco.com. Yep, it's thecoffeeco.com. And coffee is coffee is spelled with a K, Koffee, Ko, coffeeco.com. And do a little search, go to Facebook if you want to, and do a little search for Coffee Co. in the Grove. So now we're in the Grove. And, for people that don't know about the Grove in St. Louis, the Grove in St. Louis is more diverse than most areas in the city. Definitely a population that's mixed between businesses and local businesses, some larger commercial businesses. We now have the City Foundry in the Grove. Take a look. This is from the grand opening. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's see. So if you can see in this picture, this is it's a garage pull down that is and then if you can just see, look at the core on the inside. Mm-hmm. So it's beautiful the very nature decor with the wooden wood everywhere, the greenery. Here's the front. Now I'm a little, Damn Good People is, in podcast number three, I spoke to Sidney McGhee. He's the director over Damn Good People and doing all of the planning for events and things like that, while also incorporating the Coffee Co. restaurant that's owned. And that's the owner right there, Kim Lomax, and her husband, Dwight Lomax. But if you can even see it even better now, mm-hmm. Coffee Co. is on this back wall. You've got the greenery, you've got, this open scenery. Oh, that was a good one. Let me show you this one. So now you can really see how you can have mm-hmm. your laptop set up. Mm-hmm. There's Coffee Co. in the back. You've got somebody mm-hmm. on their laptop. You've got the greenery all around. You've got the wood paneling. And this is just the first floor. The second floor is even better in terms of a community space. And so now they've been in your classroom. They've been embodying language. They've been talking about how they're using language and other modalities to express. They have some intention behind their work. And now they're in this real world setting, using and transferring self-awareness, conversations about who they are into a real world space. What does that even look like for you? If you say, okay, we're going to get on the bus, we're going to get off, and we're going to go to the coffee shop. And remind you, this is not the classroom anymore. So it's not your typical situation where you're taking them on a field trip of the coffee shop and they'll all kind of follow you around and you'll show them different areas. And maybe the manager will do a presentation and talk to them about business ownership. That's still academic bubble. They're out of the bubble now. And they're at the coffee shop. And now they have to ask themselves questions that are going to take them a little bit outside of their comfort zone. They're with the people that they go to school with, but they're in a real world public space. And we don't know how that shows up for the student whose family don't frequent coffee shops. Yeah. What do they do first? Do they find themselves gravitating towards their friends and kind of following them around? But remember, this is a spatial analysis project. So at the same time, while they're experiencing the real world space, they also have to help us capture and see what that experience is really like for them.
So I think it would look like students. So first of all, I would not be at the center. It would look like students kind of spread out. It would look like maybe groups, pods of students working together. Again, thinking about, like you said, what happens when they get it? There's less of me instructing, more of them directing, right? And producing, right? It might be a group of them sitting together having a conversation. It might be some of them saying, hey, Miss Rodney, like, we just had a genius, idea of how this can work. Can we leave this space and go next door? Can we go across the street? I almost imagine like students actively engaging independently on the task, right? The task would be clear, the outcome would be clear. There would be active engagement on their part about that task. They might stay in the space. They might want to leave the space temporarily to go fact find or get some information. But I just imagine like a hum or a buzz of independent and engaged student activity around the completion of the task, right? Like, how do we, it might be, is there a calendar? Can we, plan an event here? Can we put this on a, classroom calendar where we have a sequence of events in this space that we're inviting the community into as they experience what is the culmination of, our project or this thing that we've created together, we've produced and we're going to direct. So it wouldn't be me.
I like that idea.
Or the
I
owner
wasn't thinking
kinda,
about it in that way, but I like what you bring to it, how you find yourself asking them to consider their own, it's almost like you're asking them to start taking agency
of
in that
course,
space.
of
Like
course.
how does this space show up for me? Now in a course, still we're leaning into an academic type thing, so they wouldn't be able to leave the coffee shop or anything like that. But what they could do is they could choose a modality,
Right. And
to
not permanently leave.
express.
Maybe they temporarily leave. Maybe it, to me, not permanently. If the coffee shop is ground zero, as you say, they're going to
Mm-hmm.
constantly come back to that. But maybe they want to run across the street to ask another business owner something. And they come back and like, oh, that ain't work. Center, like the coffee shop is like the center of that creative experience. So they may have to step outside of it to fact find, but they've got to come back to re-engage with their group. Maybe the group members have different roles. I often do group work around roles, right? That's a skill that I've perfected. Like, I try never to put kids in a group unless there are some roles. Who is your recorder? Who's writing stuff down? Who's going to report back to the group? Who's the person that's going to, manage the group's time, right? Your timekeeper or your tasker, so this idea of constantly moving between each other and our roles through the completion of a task. Like I said, I don't imagine them leaving the space entirely, but maybe they have to step outside for some fact finding. Maybe they want to look at the front of the space. I'm looking at the front of this, damn good people. Maybe they have to step outside to take a picture of the front of the space because they want to create something with the aesthetics of the outside, maybe. So this idea of movement is what I'm trying to communicate, even if movement involves stepping away from and then back into the space momentarily.
I like that. I like that a lot. I hadn't thought about that. And I also hadn't thought about the potential for them working together.
Yeah.
I have come to realize at this age that they find a little more comfort, at least initially, working and doing projects together, and that could actually culminate into an individual project where now they're doing that metacognitive work. Like, what was I thinking when I was working with my peers? And did this feel like me being in a real world setting? And, what would I have done? Or, just to kind of always bring it back to the self. So they're consistently questioning their own awareness and their own ability to understand what they're thinking and how they're moving, which is exactly what you said they do when they do their coursework.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
so
for me, that
good.
community piece is important. A lot of what I am intrigued by these days, this idea of epistemology, white epistemology versus Black African epistemology. And I feel like what that does for me in the classroom is community is important. The tree is important in African culture and Black culture. This idea of, a place where you gather. And for some, people that could be grandma's house, but there's this
Yeah.
centering, this communal space where
Mm,
then the community shares. So this idea of, working together in community is very important to me. Not that you can't
mm-hmm.
work individually and accomplish a task, but this idea of even bringing that back to community, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and getting feedback, having people
Mm-hmm.
ask questions that you never thought of, but that's important. So
I
the
love that.
people in Coffee Co could be that centering space, that
Mm-hmm.
communal space that they come back to again and again.
And maybe even, just thinking about the way that you envision the project for your students, having them question that, like
Yeah.
about, how do you feel about the title of this community space? Does it take you
Yeah.
away? Does it bring you in? Does it give you comfort? Does it feel inclusive, exclusive? So now, because we're talking about community and group and to get, that kind of thing versus the narrowed
Yeah.
approach. Let me ask you, what challenges do teachers face when trying to design activities like this that are community centered,
Time.
experiential opportunities?
Time. So in today's day and age, education has moved toward what is called this PLC culture, this professional learning community, whatever you call it,
Mm-hmm.
CLT, PLC, this idea that teachers aren't lone wolves, but they are part of this community that is intentional about instruction, that moves sequentially together through the educational experience. At its
Mm-hmm.
core, it's a good thing. In its practice and execution, it is often flawed because it then gets weaponized to
Mm-hmm.
force teachers to move almost lockstep together in instruction. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing that, you don't have time for work like this because this work takes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of time.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, teachers are designing the curriculum. And
Mm-hmm.
being an educator myself who has done curriculum design work, the first year is never good. You don't
Mm-hmm.
arrive at something really solid until a couple years out. And then in our educational spaces, by that time, people want to change things. Somebody's telling you
Mm-hmm.
it's time to change, or we must change, or we have this curriculum adoption window every 6 years. So then
Mm-hmm.
in your being asked to change, there isn't this recognition that you can change but still hold some things core. You can
Mm-hmm.
change but still hold successful experiences central to the curriculum. So, and if it's not your
Mm-hmm.
curriculum, it's someone else's. So time is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the belief again that we don't have time for this. We've got to get through this curriculum because someone is watching and someone is
Mm-hmm.
going to hold us accountable for how we moved through the curriculum and if our
Mm-hmm.
students learned the skills they were supposed to in our march through that curriculum. And those skill sets have very little to do with real world experiences and more to do with how you answer a question on a test.
What if the curriculum that you were given, as I heard you say, people give us curriculum.
Uh-huh.
What if it's aligned with the standards for your institution and it includes a community center component that
Then
has
we're good.
already been
We're
uh,
good. We're good, but know
shared,
that there's some teachers who are going to be like, I don't know if I like that. I want to do what I said.
but
I
then
want to take that out and put this in.
you can take it and modify it to fit what, you know, listen, I've been teaching for 20. I do not want anyone to tell me line by line, first you do this, then you do this, then you do that. That takes your agency out of the work that you're doing. So you never want a curriculum that's so rigid that you can't do it. But if you did have a curriculum that had already been situated within your institutional boundaries, that you could then modify when you want to do it, what exactly you want them doing in the community space that might be slightly different from what the curriculum is recommending, but it's still aligning with it. If you can modify it to and have the support of your administrator in implementing it, meaning you have to have the dollars to get them on the bus, to get them
then
to.
We're good. Then we're good. We're good, because there should be no fear in how you execute. I think a big part of it, like even as I think about where I am professionally. So when I was in Florida, I was handed the curriculum, and they said, here's the curriculum. But even in that handing of the curriculum, there's some choices, instructional choices I have to make based on the students that I have in front of me, right? There is, how do I get them from what is level 1 of the curriculum, intro, basic, front loading, early curricular engagement or interaction, to what they need to do at the end. Like, those are choices that teachers have, I think about as an educator. Let me use my I voice. So if I'm so I was handed the curriculum in Florida, but remember, I was handed the curriculum at a time, like I came in September, school had started in August. So I was already behind. So when you say, what's the thing, time, I feel like that's the thing that I'm always up against as an educator, is time. This idea that something has to be done by this time, and the recognition that I'm always behind. And when I think about why I'm behind, it's because of students. Students come to this in different places. Students come to this with apprehension. Students come to this with a lack of trust. Some students come with a lot of trust. Some students come with the unwillingness to listen to you, because the last time that worked, they ended up with a D. So I feel like there's so many. I would say in the scenario that you painted, then you're good, because you get to execute the curriculum, right? But then there also has to be the execution of the curriculum with some reflection in mind. Okay, I've done it. What went well? What didn't work? What would
you need
liked?
community as well. You need scholarship.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Got it. Woo! Okay, we have hit some things today. Thank you so much. I learned so many really valuable things listening to your experiences and what you bring this conversation. I love the flow. This has been so good.
Thank you. I
so
appreciate
as our parting question, as we close today's conversation, and thinking about what you just shared about those challenges and what it would take in a real, because I'm creating something that's outside of what's real, which is why I'm having these conversations with you, because you and all the other people that are a part of this collective, because I want to know what's actually possible. Okay. So what advice would you give educators like yourself who want to create more meaningful, engaging, real world centered learning experiences in their classroom?
I think the first thought that is top of mind right now, based on what we just talked about, is give yourself time. Like, you're not dealing with widgets, you're dealing with people's children, you're dealing with young people at varying stages of development and maturity. So allow yourself the opportunity, or allow yourself the time. I don't want to mix my words. Allow yourself the time to execute the thing that you have designed, and to, like you said, for me, go back and reflect upon its execution, right? I would also say be courageous. And I know we have some words that we use today in life and in education that you're like, oh, I heard that already. But you got to be courageous, because sometimes you just have to decide as the educator that you are the teacher of record and you're going to do this. Like, period. I'm the teacher of record, period. I'm not doing it that way, or I am doing it this way. So I would say time, courage. And then for me, the important part of teaching that I love is create together with your students that space.
I love that.
Where students can come feeling safe to fail. Like
Safe to
everything
fail.
is so, I'm an A student, a GPA. But sometimes, I learned from experiences that I didn't do well in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was okay because it didn't result in academic catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
It resulted in me growing as a learner and being stronger. So I would say
Mm-hmm.
time, courage, and create the space where failure is okay, because failure means we're only going to get better at what we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome,
Thank you
Dr.
so
Smith.
much.
You're welcome, Dr. Smith. I appreciate you.
I do be here.
This
Yeah.
almost didn't happen, so I'm glad it did. And
Yes,
I'm
thank
glad
you
we had the
so, so,
time.
so much. I know that
Good to
our
know.
listeners are going to very much benefit from what you shared today. So I really
Thank you, Dr.
appreciate your
Smith. I
time.
appreciate your doing this in commitment to better curriculum.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
work.
And hopefully a better world,
Yes,
a better human being, because
a
that's
better
where this
human being,
conversation started with, this
better
focus
human
on us.
being.
So,
Thank you.
yay! Thank you for listening to Educate Us. Educate Us is a podcast and learning collective of TMS Visionary Group. All podcast content is protected by copyright. Copyright 2026 TMS Visionary Group, all rights reserved. New episodes are released every Monday. Thank you for joining the conversation.